As technology continues to advance and become more integrated into our daily lives, the need for strong cybersecurity measures has never been greater. Now, whether you're a small business owner looking to protect your company's sensitive data, or an individual trying to keep your personal information secure, in this podcast, we'll help you with vocabulary and advice on how to keep yourself safe on the internet. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Reza y Craig.
Hello and welcome, especially if you're a new listener. Welcome to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with 50 years of teaching between us, Reza and I are going to help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, mate?
I've been fine. Although around New Year, that was a couple of months ago, I went down with a really bad virus. Not on my computer, but a good old-fashioned bodily virus. So there's a lot of things been going around recently.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned computer viruses because this week we're focusing on cyber security. And that is thanks to friend of the show, Jose. Reza, could you read Jose's email?
Jose writes, I was wondering if you have recorded a podcast talking about a really hot topic these days, cybersecurity. In other words, how to secure your bank account, how to avoid the different ways to hack our data. I have looked for that topic in your EnglishPodcast.com webpage, and I think that there is no episode about it. Am I right?
Yes, you are.
If I am, perhaps you can give it a go.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jose, for your suggestion and for your help in putting this episode together with the vocabulary, etc. And who's this Jose guy? Well, I know Jose well because he's a member of my English Masterclass course for conversation. And by the way, if you're interested, if you'd like to join me and a small group of students online to practice your speaking, just send me an email to craig@inglespodcast.com and I'll give you more information. But let's listen to Jose because he also sent a voice message asking about a vocabulary point from a previous episode.
Hi Reza, hi Craig, how are you doing? This is Jose from Seville. Today, listening to your comparative adjective episode, I heard a new word, at least for me, that is whatsoever. And I was searching for that word, but I don't know how or when to use whatsoever. So please, can you explain it to me? Or if you have already talked about that word in the previous episode, can you point me to the right one? Thank you guys for your amazing work. Looking forward to listening to your next episode. Bye bye. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Jose, for your message. And anyone who hasn't heard that episode on comparatives, Jose is referring to episode 453. So go to inglespodcast.com/453 and you'll hear that episode.
Now, Jose, your message was very clear. Thank you very much. And it's nice to know we have a listener from Seville, a place that I like very much. It's a really lovely town. And your question was about whatsoever. Yes, we have recorded a podcast about that, haven't we, Craig?
Yes, we did. It was episode 393. And I did mention it to Jose because we have been in contact preparing this episode together. So if you are interested, anybody out there, about whatsoever, whoever, wherever, whenever, whichever, whatever, however, etc., go to inglespodcast.com/393 and you'll find out what those words mean and how to use them.
But now back to Jose's email, the subject of cybersecurity, Thanks, Jose. A very, very good idea. Something we certainly need to talk about, don't we, Craig?
Yeah, we've spoken in the past about technology, but not specifically about this area of being safe online, and I think it's really important. Now, before we begin to explain vocabulary and give you some advice, we are not experts. Definitely not. We're going to focus on the English and the meaning of these words, but please don't take our advice as if it were from an IT expert, because we are definitely not, are we?
We're not, though having said that, Craig is being modest. I think he knows a hell of a lot about IT, a lot more about me. I really am not very IT literate, but Craig knows a lot. He's being modest.
Yes, but not about security. It's a whole nother area. It's like saying for me, Craig, do you know about teaching English to children? Well, no, you do, because you do it. But for me, it's a completely separate skill than teaching English to adults. It's a different area. So take that as a warning when you listen to our advice later on. But let's start with the first word, and that's encryption. Now, the verb is to encrypt, and it means convert information or data into a kind of code which prevents anybody accessing the information who are not authorized to do so. So it prevents unauthorized access. And we speak about encryption as being in layers. Layer in Spanish is capa. So you can have very deep layered encryption, which is very, very difficult to decipher and understand. And that obviously is more secure.
Another word that I think pretty much everybody will have heard of is firewall. But what does it mean? Are we talking about actual hot flames? No. In the world of cybersecurity...
Well, Jose did say it was a hot topic.
It is a hot topic. That's true. That's true. But hot in the sense of very topical. Everyone's talking about it, but it's not going to literally burn your fingers. So a firewall could be described as a security system that, let's say, it monitors. That means it looks at or it controls incoming and outgoing network traffic, so both directions. And firewalls are used to prevent cyber attacks. Besides antivirus, that's another method, but a firewall is separate to an antivirus. Think of a wall that the virus or the other type of nasty software which shouldn't be in your system tries to get past. So the idea of a firewall is it cannot get past this wall, this security wall.
Do you use antivirus software?
Very, very basic. I just use the Microsoft
Yeah, me
one,
too.
which comes with Microsoft. Is that the one you use, yeah?
Yeah, I keep it up to date. Obviously, you need to keep it up to date. But yeah, I think some antivirus programs can slow down your computer. And I also think, although I'd be happy to be corrected here if I'm wrong, that if you have a router, or if you're an American speaker, a router, then that acts as a firewall. So that will protect your computer to some extent against attacks from outside, because it has to go through the router to get to your computer. And the router opens ports, P-O-R-T-S, which are like doors, to allow the internet to come through. I think that's right, but open to correction if I'm wrong.
Let's start talking about some of the specific, nasty, unpleasant, or perhaps I should say malicious software. Malicious is a good word because it is from the word malicious that we get the word malware.
Mal is bad in Spanish.
So mal, bad. And you do have a word in Spanish, I think, as well, malicio. You might not use it that much, but in English, we have a similar word, malicious, bad, with bad intentions. So malware is software which is malicious. It's designed to harm or exploit computer systems. That's kind of the generic name, malware, all the bad stuff.
And you probably know the word spy, S-P-Y, James Bond, for example. Spyware, that's W-A-R-E, spyware. That's a kind of malware that will track you or spy on you and collect your personal data, which is really creepy. It will look at the way you're typing on the keyboard. so your keystrokes, and it will remember your keystrokes and use that to attack your computer. So that's spyware, a really, really bad, evil James Bond.
Another type of malware is adware. So this time it's AD plus ware, W-A-R-E. So adware comes from the word advertisement plus software. So adware is a form of malware that displays, it shows unwanted advertisements, or in American English, advertisements, different pronunciation, unwanted ads which you didn't ask for, and it tracks the victim's habits with a view to basically selling them something that they haven't looked for. So it doesn't actually steal your data and do something illegal with it directly, but it keeps making you look at ads that you don't want to look at, you never asked to look at, and you might either on purpose or even accidentally buy something.
But doesn't Google do that anyway now with cookie tracking? They know what you're searching for, and then they'll try to sell you something based on your behavior online, the websites you're visiting.
True, but you agreed to those cookies. With adware, you didn't agree to it. That's what makes it technically illegal. You didn't ask for it.
Ransomware. What does the word ransom mean? Well, if I kidnap Reza, that means I take Reza by force and keep him in my flat and tie him up and then phone his mum and say, if you want Reza back, you'll have to pay €1,000. Then I'm holding Reza to ransom. And Reza's mum says, no, you can keep him. So ransomware, again, W-A-R-E, is malware that encrypts data. There's that word again, to encrypt, to put it in code. It encrypts data on a victim system, and then it demands payment in exchange for a decryption key. So you can hold someone to ransom, hold their computer or their device to ransom, and unless you pay an amount of money, they will not release the computer and decrypt it. So that's ransomware. Remember, if you want to see these words written and the explanation, go to inglespodcast.com and look at the show notes.
Craig, I hope it never happens, but imagine it did happen to you. Would you pay the ransomware to have your computer access returned to you?
No, because I keep a backup, and we'll speak about backups later. So you never know how much they're going to ask for, and if they're going to do the same thing a week later and ask for more money. So I would get a new computer or wipe the hard drive, just completely wipe everything, reinstall the programs, and use the backup to start from scratch, to start again. I wouldn't pay, would you?
No, same as you. It's as simple as this. If they've done it once, they can do it again.
Exactly.
They're going to do it again. Of course they are.
Yeah. Have you ever been fishing?
For salmon and mackerel and trout? Is that what you mean?
No, because I'm spelling it Phishing. So the same pronunciation as catching fish, fishing, but spelt with a PH. What's that, Reza?
So phishing in the world of IT is an attempt to trick people, to get them to provide sensitive information by posing, by pretending, so it's not real, posing as a trustworthy entity. Could be a bank, it could be some important company, could even be an individual. And it's one of the most common attacks to get your personal bank information because, of course, money above all is what they want. Although data is useful too, but if they can get money immediately, even better. Now, we've all received some phishing, I'm sure. Some of them are really obvious, but some of them are not. Who hasn't received the obvious one of, I am a Nigerian prince who has a lot of money that I shouldn't really have, and using your bank account, I can keep it and give you a bit as well. Who hasn't had that email? Have you had that, Craig?
Yeah, but they're more creative these days. You could get an email, and usually you find them in your junk folder, your spam folder. Your order for your new toaster has been delayed from Amazon. Please click this link and ask for a new delivery date. Well, if you have ordered a toaster recently from Amazon, you might click on that link, but it's not taking you to Amazon. It's taking you to a false website where you will give your information and then they've got you like a fish. You're on the line, you're hooked, and they've got your information.
Yes, they use Amazon a lot, don't they? Pretending to be Amazon.
And PayPal as well. Yeah, your PayPal account has been compromised.
Yeah.
And then you say, my PayPal account. So you go in there, you give your information, your password, and they can access your account.
Have you ever been tempted to reply in some way, but like as a kind of joke, saying, oh, yes, here's my bank account details, and give them a false one? Or is it better just not to open that Pandora's box? For a laugh, say, oh, yes, here are all my details that you asked for, and give them loads of false information and see if they do anything?
Not recently, because I think it might be too dangerous. But years ago, I remember getting emails, like you said, from the prince in some African country, for example, who wants, and they make mistakes in the email, so it's obviously not an English speaker. So I replied to the email and said, I noticed some mistakes in your email. If you'd like to go to mansioningles.com, you'll find courses where you can improve your English. And I used to copy paste and send it back. But these days, it's too tricky, it's too complicated. I feel a bit scared to do it in case I get caught from a phishing scam.
Could it be that physically, technically, the act of just replying somehow activates something?
I don't know.
Yeah, we'd rather not find out, yeah?
Yeah.
The hard way.
Why take the chance? Why take the chance? Our next word is a word I did not know, so I've learned lots from this information from Jose, is spoofing. SPOOF. I know the word spoof because some comedy films like Airplane, for example, is a spoof of a serious film. So it's a humorous imitation. But what does spoofing mean in cybersecurity?
So in the world of computers, it's a technique used to deceive, to cause deception, to deceive computer systems by forging. That's falsifying, forging, forging, by forging network addresses or other identifying information.
So it's tricking you. It's tricking you into thinking that something is real, but really it's falsifying the information. There's a particular type of spoofing called DNS spoofing, and you may have seen DNS at some point. It means domain name system. And the domain is where your website lives. So say, for example, you want to send a letter or a postcard. Do you remember those? You wrote an address and you put it in the post box and the postman deliver it to number 32, Lettsby Avenue, for example. And that is your address. Well, the internet works in a similar way. So this DNS spoofing is when a hacker, a bad hacker, because there are good hackers, but a bad hacker is able to redirect that address, that domain name system, to their system instead of the real system. So they're sending it to their address and not to the real address. So let me give you an example. You think you're going to your bank webpage, and you click on a link because you've seen this link in an email. It looks like it's from your bank, and you click it, and it sends you to a web page that looks exactly like your bank's web page. But it isn't. It's a false web page, and the DNS, the address, is not the real address of the bank. It's the address of the hacker, and he's got you because then you put in your username and password. So it looks like your bank's website, it smells like your bank website, it tastes like your bank website, but it isn't, so be careful.
Another typical con, C-O-N, con is deception, is the use of a keylogger. That's a program that records or logs, to log is to record, every keystroke, every single button you press on the keyboard. So it records every keystroke, especially in order to gain fraudulent access to passwords.
What does fraudulent mean?
Fraudulent means committing fraud, not for the correct purposes, but to obtain money falsely.
Illegally.
So that's what a key logger does. It records every single key you press.
Man in the Middle is a great song by Michael Jackson. Also, Man in the Middle is a kind of an attack that you can suffer from. Man in the Middle, it's often abbreviated to MITM. An MITM attack is a kind of a cyber attack where the attacker secretly intercepts and gets access to messages that are being sent between two people. And these two people think they're communicating directly with each other, but they're not. There's a man in the middle. So the person is, the hacker is kind of eavesdropping into your messaging conversation. What does eavesdrop mean? Well, that's what I used to do when I was very young and my parents sent me to bed and I couldn't sleep, and I'd go down and sit at the top of the stairs and listen to my parents' conversation. So I was eavesdropping on what they said, and they didn't know I was there. And hackers can do the same thing. So Reza sends me a message about recording next week's podcast, and I get a message that I think is from Reza that says, send Jose 500 euros for his contribution to this podcast. And I say, okay, and I send it. But it's not Reza saying that. It's the man in the middle. That is another kind of cyber attack.
You've probably all heard of the word cloning, but in a more general way of copying, reproducing something artificially. But we're going to talk specifically about SIM cloning. SIM, capital letters, SIM, your SIM card. So with SIM cloning, what they do is they get a legitimate SIM card duplicated somehow. They copy it. And when the cloning is completed, the cloned SIM cards identifying information is transferred onto a separate secondary SIM card, which can now be used with the information illegally obtained on it to do all the things that the proper original SIM card could do. So obviously you want to avoid your SIM card being cloned.
Yeah, and that's a very powerful way to access someone's personal information, because many banks and payment systems, they use the SIM card in your phone to get approval for a transaction. So you buy something online, you get a message on your phone, and if someone's got a copy of your SIM card, they can get access to it. And that's where two-factor authentication or verification comes in. Two-factor or two-step. What does that mean? Well, it's a security process that requires the user, that's you, to give two separate forms of identification in order to access a system or an account. So you get an extra layer of security. There's that word layer again. An example would be you go to your computer, you go to your bank's website, you send them your username and password, and you get a code number on your phone. So somebody would need to have your bank's address, your password for your bank, and your username for your bank, and your phone in order to access your account. So it's two separate doors, if you like, to get through to access your bank or your account.
Craig, does your online banking system require two-step verification?
It does, yeah.
So after you put in your password, etc., they send you an SMS message, I guess.
Not to access the account, but to pay for things. So if it's actually money that's leaving my account, I have to give two layers of security verification or authentication.
So what are attackers, hackers looking for? Vulnerability. That's an important word. If you're vulnerable, you're open to attack. So vulnerability is a weakness, or we could say a flaw. F-L-A-W. Some kind of problem that means something doesn't work 100%. A flaw in a system that can be exploited by attackers.
Our next word is bot, B-O-T, which is a similar word to robot, but without the ro. So what's a bot? B-O-T. It's a computer program that operates as an agent for a user or another program to simulate human activity, as robots do. So an internet bot or a bot is a software program that is on the internet and does repetitive tasks. It does jobs over and over again as a robot would. Now, some of this bot traffic or these bot actions are good. There are good bots, but there are also bad bots, and they can have a hugely negative impact on a website or on an application.
The word botnet is a mixture of bot with internet. So a botnet is a group of infected computers, all controlled by a remote attacker for malicious purposes. So if you're a really good hacker, you can set up your own botnet.
I'm trying to remember the story of Troy and the Trojan horse. I remember there was a big wooden horse that the people from Troy built. Now, was it the people from Troy that were inside the horse and then they went into another city to attack it? It was, wasn't it?
That's right. It was left, this wooden horse was left as a present inside.
And the soldiers were inside it.
Or near, I think maybe not inside, but near the city walls as a present. And then they retreated. And so the defenders thought, okay, we'll take the present. So they took it inside, but it was full of soldiers from the enemy side. And they got out and managed to kill the defenders.
Well, in a similar way, there's a Trojan horse, sometimes abbreviated to a Trojan, and it's a type of malware that disguises itself as legitimate normal code or software. So it looks okay, but once it's inside the network, the attackers can carry out or do any action that a normal user could do. For example, they could export your files or change and modify your data or delete files or change the contents that's inside the device. So they have control because it looks like a legitimate program. It's like a Trojan horse. It looks friendly, but it's not.
An expression which you hear these days more and more is zero-day exploit. A previously unknown vulnerability, so you don't know about it, it's exploited by attackers before they can fix it. In other words, before a patch is released. A patch is software to fix a problem.
Yeah, like a patch on your jeans. If you have a hole in your jeans or your clothes, you put a patch on it to repair it and cover it. And you can do the same thing with software.
And hackers, they invest a lot of money in this kind of attack because they can make a lot of money from it. And if you, as a company, let's say, if you don't know that you have a problem, then they can get a lot of money out of you before you fix it. So you should try to avoid having a back door, an unknown way into your system. So the hackers can use it as many times as possible to get whatever information they want. Could be money, of course, or just information. It could be to install bots, to install Trojans, whatever. But then, when the bug gets known worldwide, then it's not a 0-day anymore because people know about it. So it isn't the first day, it isn't 0-day. And companies, the big companies like Microsoft, Apple, Android, etc., will work hard to search for a workaround, in other words, a patch to get rid of it. But before it gets to that point, it's known as a 0-day exploit.
And with all these different threats around and possible bad hackers trying to break into your software and to your accounts, etc., if you're a company, you probably would be advised to get a cyber security audit. Well, what's that? It's an evaluation of your organization's security and readiness to defend against these cyber threats. You can get people to come into your company. They will look at your system. They will check it. Maybe they'll try to hack it and get into it to find those back doors that Reza mentioned. And obviously, this can be expensive. The more money you pay, the better audit you're going to get. So big companies invest a lot of money protecting your data that's on their servers.
Now, to be able to gain illegal access to someone's data isn't all about using high tech, although it helps. A technique known as social engineering can also be used. It's a technique used to manipulate people into divulging, giving away information, divulging sensitive information, or performing actions that are not in their best interests. And according to Jose, who has a lot of contacts in the cybersecurity department of banks, he says this is one of the most common ways to steal money from people these days. In other words, the typical kind of situation where, say, a guy phones saying he's from Microsoft support.
Happened to me.
Help you, but he's not from Microsoft. So it's happened to you.
It's happened to me. Many years ago, I got a phone call here in my flat in Valencia. A guy he said he's from Microsoft. He had an Indian accent. And he was asking me about my PC. He wanted to do a security check. He was worried that there was a problem with my computer. Now, Microsoft, they don't phone you. They don't phone you, especially if you haven't asked them to. So I was suspicious immediately, and I started asking questions. I said, do you know what operating system I'm using? And he did. And I asked him more questions about things, and he knew. And eventually I said, well, I'm sorry, I don't need your help. And I put down the phone. But it was interesting to me to know what he knew about my situation on my computer. So he knew some things, some basic things, and he knew my phone number. And that's how they try to get you to go online and give away your personal details, maybe go to a false website and give information that they can use against you. So be careful of those telephone calls, especially when you haven't initiated the contact and you haven't reached out to them first.
Now, the initials DOS mean a lot to all people who teach English as a foreign language, TEFLers. It's, of course, Director of Studies.
Yeah, Director of Studies.
But it's not in the world of cybersecurity. A DOS is denial of service. Denial means no, you can't have it. So a denial of service, that's when a system is being attacked by a huge number of bots, bad bots. So the target system is compromised. It can't work properly. And it could end in a message going up, page not found, or server unavailable, or something like that. So the target system could be a web page, for example. It cannot reply to the request of the real clients, not the bots, who want to use it correctly. They're requesting information, but they can't get access because the system is being attacked by so many bots that it can't function properly.
And I think you had a similar experience recently when you were trying to contact your local language school. And it wasn't a malicious attack, but it was not from bots, but from people who wanted to register for an exam. And it was a DOS result, wasn't it?
Exactly. It can happen for legitimate reasons. There's no bad intention. Simply too many people were using it and the server couldn't handle it.
It crashed.
Yeah.
And more recently, we've been hearing about deep fake. Deep fake, another compound noun. What does that mean? Well, that's where you're watching a video. For example, you're watching Barack Obama and he's speaking and he's telling you things, but it's not actually Barack Obama. It looks like Barack Obama, but it isn't. It sounds like him, but it's a video that's been created from other videos that he's made, and they have taken his voice and his face and his image, and they've made him speak words that he didn't actually say. A deep fake video. I think there was one of Tom Cruise as well that was quite famous, and maybe I've seen some deep fake videos of Boris Johnson speaking a load of rubbish, but actually it might have been him. So you never know, do you? With politicians.
With some, you never know.
So we've gone through some vocabulary. Let's look at some ways that you can protect yourself against these potential threats. Now, let's give you a disclaimer. As I said at the beginning, we are not cybersecurity experts, so we take no responsibility for any problems arising from the following advice. But Reza, what could people do to protect themselves?
Well, I'm sure a lot of you have already heard it, but please pay attention to this. Use strong, unique, not obvious, unique passwords. And also, if you can, activate two-factor authentication. Yeah, don't just have one step. If you can have two, have it. The more security, the better, right? Particularly if you're talking about a bank account or something like that. And you could maybe even consider using a password manager, a system like LastPass or 1Password, a system that manages with even more security all your passwords.
Yeah, they encrypt them and you only need to remember one key password. So it's very important that you do remember that because if you can't use the password manager, but with just one password that will then protect all your other passwords. And somebody told me once something that I think is quite clever. If you think of the first line of a song you like and you take the first letter of each word, that could be your password. For example, Frank Sinatra, My Way. Do you remember the first line? And now the end is near,
Yeah.
and so I face
The final curtain.
So take the first letter, A-N, capital A, small n, T-E-I-N-A-S, capital I, F-T-F-E. Those are the first letters of each word. Then add a number, any number, maybe a symbol, like a $sign or an asterisk or something like that, or a question mark, and you have a very secure password. And if you remember that song and the first line of that song, only you know it, and there's your password. It's pretty safe.
Another very simple thing to do, but some people don't do it, and they really should, is to type with your own fingers on the keyboard the website address of important places like your bank, for example. Type that into the browser. Don't follow links to your bank. If you get an email saying, just follow this link, don't follow it. So type it in and check that you can see the correct address of your bank in the browser before you enter the login information.
And I think you had an experience once, Reza, where you became suspicious of a web page that you thought was fake. And what did you do when you suspected this fake website?
And I tell you what, it was fake. I was right. It was, I won't name the company, better not for many legal reasons, but it was actually a well-known email provider. And I thought, this doesn't look quite right. I know sometimes they change the image, without perhaps telling you, or perhaps I don't bother to heed their warnings. But I thought, I don't like the look of this. I thought, well, what could I do? And it occurred to me, I'll put in my password wrong, deliberately. Because if it's the real website, this email provider, I shouldn't be able to get access. So I put it in wrong, but I got access. You shouldn't get access if your password's wrong, right? So it's kind of a reverse psychology. How could I have got in when I know the password's wrong? It's not the real site, is it?
Do you remember how you got to that web page in the beginning?
I think it was me being stupid above all. I think I mistyped the web page. So it led me to a web page with a very similar address, but not exactly the same. And it was clearly intentional to catch people who had mistyped it into thinking that it was something else. So actually it was really basic. If I had paid attention and typed correctly, it would never have happened. But just because I got a letter wrong, then I went to a different website and I guess it would have let me in. It did let me in, and from there onwards, who knows, maybe they would have got information out of me, but clearly then it couldn't have been my account if they accepted a password, which I know is wrong.
Yeah. So it's always a good idea to look in the browser window if you're using Google or whatever browser you're using, Microsoft Edge, Firefox. Look at the top and make sure it's the exact address of the bank or the website that you're going to. And be suspicious and cautious of emails and messages that arrive in links. Don't click any links you're not sure of. Only download files to your computer from known sources. For example, if Reza sends me an email, it's obviously from him and he sends me a link, I'll click it, hoping that his email account hasn't been compromised. But if you trust somebody, then there's a good chance the link is okay. But be very, very careful of clicking links in emails and also downloading things to your computer if you're not sure of where they're coming from.
Here's one which to me seems very obvious, but a lot of people don't bother to do it. Hover, Hover, hover. So a helicopter stays in the air, but without moving anywhere. A plane can't do that, but a helicopter can. It can hover. Hover over the email address. Is it really who it says it is? Don't ask me how they do it, but hackers can send you an email, and what appears on your list is that it's from your bank or Microsoft, but leave the cursor over it. It turns out that's not who it's from. You don't even have to open it sometimes. So you get that supposed email from Amazon asking if you received your package, but you keep the cursor over it. It's not from Amazon. It's some bizarre address. You don't even have to open it, but you don't get to see the strange address it's really from unless you hover over the fake address. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, that's a good piece of advice. Yeah, definitely. Another thing that sounds obvious, but don't forget to do it, make sure you keep your operating system and your software up to date. Al día in Spanish. Up to date with the latest security patches and the latest antivirus software. If you use one, make sure you do the updates on your computer because they regularly put patches in their security to make sure you don't get attacked by any of the threats that we've mentioned today.
And use reputable antivirus software. Of course, don't use some cheap one you've never heard of. Pay a little bit of extra money and do it properly. It's something that's worth doing right.
The next piece of advice is something that I was affected by. This has happened to me. Make sure you don't do what I do and use public Wi-Fi networks for any sensitive transactions or putting in sensitive information. So maybe you're the kind of person who works in public places like hotels or airports or internet cafes or just cafes that have Wi-Fi. And if you do that, you could use a VPN, a virtual private network, when you use the internet from a public place or an unsecured Wi-Fi network, and that will encrypt your online activity and protect your privacy. So what happened to me was I was in a London hotel at a conference and I wanted to sign up for Uber to get an Uber cab to the airport. So I got onto the hotel's Wi-Fi, went to Uber, put in my credit card details, and there was somebody there that took my credit card details as it was traveling in the air to the Wi-Fi backwards and forwards. So don't be stupid like I was. I should have known better. It was a tech conference full of podcasters. Somebody there knew what they were doing and they hacked my credit card and used it to buy other things. And I needed to cancel my credit card.
Apart from taking technical precautions, just be careful about the information you share on social media and other public platforms, on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. Don't share certain things because this information can then be used by anybody, because anybody can access most of the stuff you share, right? To target you in phishing attacks or other kind of social engineering tactics. Actually, there's something even more basic than that. Don't be like quite a few dumb footballers in England. They used to put things like, really looking forward to the match on Saturday. The whole family coming. Such a big match. Nobody would miss it for the world. So the thief thought, the whole family's going out there. Okay.
The house is empty.
The house is empty. You earn £1 million a month or a week because you're a Manchester United football player. I think it's probably worth burgling your house. That happened a lot. Match day, the time of the match, or they'd said they were going on holiday, whatever, because you know that, a top-class football player is going to have a lot of valuable equipment in their house and money. Somebody worth robbing.
I often post my holiday photos and videos on social media when I get back from my holiday and I'm at home, because if you're posting it while you're away, if somebody has your address, people know you're not at home. Also, make sure you back up your important data regularly. Anything of value in your computer, your photos, your bank information, your Word document files, etc. Make sure they're backed up because, as Reza said, if you get attacked by ransomware and somebody takes control of your computer, you want to make sure you have backups. And sometimes the hard drive does crash and you lose the information in your computer. So I suggest doing a 3-2-1 backup strategy. That means 3 copies of everything. 2 copies will be local and 1 copy will be off-site. Let's say, for example, you have a laptop and you have information in your laptop. That's 1 copy. Make an external copy with an external hard drive. That gives you 2 copies, but you've got 2 copies in the same place. What happens if you do get burgled when you're playing football and somebody steals both those backups or both those copies? You need an off-site copy. That could be in the cloud. You can pay for a service or use Google Drive or something similar, or just make another hard drive of your information and take it to where you work, or give it to somebody else in your family that lives in a different house. So if it's off-site, you've always got another copy somewhere else. So 3 copies, 2 on site and 1 in a different place.
And of course, last but not least, just in general, stay informed about the latest security threats and also the best practices for staying safe online. So if you know that there's a new and really powerful virus going around, be aware of it, be on the lookout for it. Don't become a victim of it.
And that's all. We hope we haven't overloaded you and your computer with too many vocabulary items and security threats. But now it's your turn to practice your English. Thank you very much, Jose, for your help with this episode. Have you ever been hacked? Are you a hacker? Because there are good hackers. Or maybe you're a bad hacker. We'd love to hear from you if you have been hacked, or if we've made any mistakes in this episode. Let us know. You can send your voice messages to speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Well, how can people reach us on email, Reza?
You could write to us. You can get Craig if you write to craig@inglespodcast.com, or me if you write to belfastreza@gmail.com.
This podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. Why not visit the online store at store.mansioningles.net, and there you'll find courses, paid courses, that will help you with your English.
As always, we'd like to thank all the people who voluntarily donate money and they support the podcast on the Patreon scheme. And what those people do is they donate as little as $1.50 per month. And as a thank you to those people, we give them instant access to audio transcriptions. If you're interested, have a look at the show notes and there's a link to www.patreon.com/inglespodcast.
We don't have time to mention everybody who is supporting us on Patreon, but we would like to say a huge thank you to our most recent Patreon supporters who have joined us this month, and they are Luz Viviana Moreno, Carlos, Maria Madriaga, Pedro Carrillo, Susana, Francisco Otero, and Arnild Kessel. And Francisco and Arnild are sponsoring us for more than the minimum $150. So thank you to you and to all of our lovely Patreon supporters. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen. And Reza, let's tell people what they can expect on next week's episode.
Next week, we're doing what to say when you get a present you don't like.
We'll see you next week. Thank you for listening this week. Have a lovely week. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.